Dragic suddenly might be available. The Rockets, of course, showing interest, and then within the past 48 hours, there have been some conflicting reports about whether or not he really is available. We'll dive into that in today's episode. What are your thoughts, Forrest? How are you?
Hey, pretty good. I thought so. This is an exciting time of the year for Rockets fans. Maury always trades at the deadline. If it's even if it's not Dragic, which who who knows how likely that is, or honestly, something will happen. It would be nice if he'd be an upgrade to point guard. Yeah, there's been a lot of reports about Phoenix. It looks like they realize they're going to have to lose one of their point guards. They're not going to reasonably be able to keep around those three guys. They're going to demand too much salary. They're going to be too hard to keep, and they need some front court reinforcements. So they apparently would rather not lose Dragic, but they are aware of the reality that they might lose Dragic in the offseason. But they don't seem to really be backing down. Or the reports are that they want to have, what is it, a first round draft pick and a potential All
A
Star.
player with all-star potential, I guess
Yeah.
was the exact wording.
So they're asking a king's ransom for him. Who knows if that's really what they think they're gonna get? They're posturing. These things always negotiations always go like this.
Yeah. Um, well, I'm glad you made that distinction, but just to circle back a bit, it's kind of shocking that it came to this, but not really, because you and I had been saying for a few weeks that neither of us thought that Dragic would become available. I think even as recently as the most recent episode, episode 69, which I think we recorded last Monday, I think both of us still didn't think that Dragic would become available, and then the report just hit last week that the Suns would be open to dealing him. And so it's shocking in that sense because you didn't think that it would come to that, but it is logical. I mean, they have been in a tailspin in this recent stretch, and everybody had been pointing to that. Let's see how the Suns do and whether or not that would dictate their future. And so I guess it got to that. And of course, as you said, the reports recently seem to indicate that they would prefer to trade Thomas, and that they would hope to get a potential All Star back. Well, of course, I mean that of course that
Yeah,
they're going to
that's what you
set
always want.
the price at that. There's no way that they get that for a guy who would basically be a rental when there really aren't any other suitors other than the Rockets seriously on the market. Um, what do you think comes out of this? I guess. I mean, obviously Phoenix is posturing. I mean, first of all, do you buy these reports as being indicative of the actual reality, or are you in with me that that's just posturing on Phoenix's part just to maintain some sense of value for Dragic?
I think they'd like to get that. I think they know they're not going to. If they think they're actually going to get that, then they're fooling themselves. Like unless you have an assurance from Dragic that he's going to sign in the offseason, then you're not going to do that deal at all. If he does assure you he's going to sign in the offseason, then you think about it, right? Because if you could get him on a long term contract, his probably his last major contract, that's not bad. But if he's going to go, if it's just a rental, no one's going to pay a first round draft pick and a potential All Star
Well,
or someone who
who
could,
even
yeah, who.
needs other than Houston? I mean, I've seen some stuff about maybe the Celtics poking around in there, but I mean, other
Yeah,
than the Rockets, who's going to want a 29-year-old point guard who, as great as he is, I mean, he would fit this team perfectly. He's still not, in the top five, maybe, maybe on the border of the top 10. Other than Houston, who even would want him? And so
yeah.
that's
Well,
the
there's
dilemma that
there's the Lakers,
Phoenix
but they don't
is.
have anything. So yeah, I don't. I think they want to try to drive up the price as much as possible. They want to get something good for Thomas. I think is what's going on. They want to see what they can get for Isaiah Thomas, but that's a similar boat. His contract is pretty cheap for him, but he's also not nearly as good as Dragic, and so his it's the same situation where teams don't really need point guards that aren't like a top 10 point guard. There's so few teams that need someone he's an excellent player, but he's just it's such a stacked position
I mean,
that there's
especially
such
if
a
you
low market.
consider that Aaron Brooks. is making the minimum. And not to say that Thomas is Aaron Brooks, but you kind of get what I'm getting at there. Um, and so Phoenix, they greatly would prefer to trade Thomas and hold on to Dragic. But the problem there is that as low as Dragic's price tag might be, and there's no way that it's going to be nearly as high as what the reports are. As low as Dragic's price tag may be, I don't know that Thomas's might be even lower. So I mean, you may run into the scenario where, and this would be the worst case scenario for Phoenix, is if they end up trading Thomas for a package they're not entirely thrilled with, and then Dragic turns around and leaves in the offseason. That's the
Yeah.
worst possible situation for them. And so I think for them the question is, let's say that you can get the Pelicans pick from the Rockets. And let's say that, is that better than what you can get for Thomas? Because I don't think that you're going to get an offer for Thomas that's better than that Pelicans pick.
Probably not. That pick is not. It's not an amazing pick, but it's very likely to be a lottery pick. It's one of the better pieces on the market right now. I think that they would be happy to have that pick, but they also would want to grab as much otherwise too. The fact that Dragic can slip into that Lynn trade exception is going to be pretty big for Houston if they do try to get this deal going, because it means they don't have to worry about making the salaries match.
Actually, the Lynn trade exception was used in the Corey Brewer trade.
They do
So
that. Okay.
yeah, but I mean that's not going to be an issue because they still
They have
have
to play a seller.
they have Papa Nicola and they have Jason Terry that they can use to match
Okay.
those salaries.
Yeah.
So they'll be okay on that front. Um,
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see if the. I mean, we don't know what's happening. This may just be literally that the Suns are trying to back the Rockets into giving them more. I mean, who knows where the sticking point is going to be? I've the reports that the Suns are meeting with Dragic today to discuss signing an extension, and I guess just gauge where he's at. I figure that probably has a lot to do with what's happening. What he feels like doing in the off season is pretty integral to what they need to do right now. Because if he says no, I'm going to go get a big contract in the off season, then they have to move right now.
yeah,
But
and
if
up to this point, he hasn't really given them any indication that he's going to be loyal to them. And so I think again, I think for them, what it comes down to is waiting until the deadline and seeing what they can get from Thomas, and at the same time posturing with Houston, seeing what they can get for Thomas, and seeing if that's more than what Houston is willing to give up for Dragic. And so let's say Houston is willing to give up both Jones and the Pelicans pick, and you can't get a better package for Thomas. And I don't think you can get a better package for Isaiah Thomas than what Houston would be willing to give up for Dragic. And so I think ultimately, I hate to go out on a limb here, but I feel like Houston is able to get this deal done, and I'll get to this later. But I just feel that also there's a sense of urgency now for the Rockets that may have never been there before, just because of where they are right now in terms of the cap, in the sense that this summer, without gutting their team, they're not going to be able to clear any real cap space. I mean, they can get up to about seven
yeah,
million, but that's with gutting their team. So they're in this holding pattern where they keep having to let guys go until they get that third player. And so I think it's imperative for the Rockets to get that third player, and they realize that pressure is on.
yeah, my only concern with Dragic, whether it happens or not, if he were to come to Houston, he says he's reportedly not excited at how much off ball and two guard he's been playing. Uh, I don't know how much that would improve in Houston. He'd be playing a lot of like I guess switching possessions with James Harden. I'm sure there would be periods where he would play at the two whenever they bring Beverly out. So he would probably still have to get used to it, but it might be a little more palatable if they're winning more games than Phoenix is. So
Yeah,
uh,
it's definitely not the ideal fit. Like I 100% agree with you that it's not the ideal fit, and even in a vacuum, Dragic is not worth the max contract that he's going to get. But
it sure is.
when you look at him as the final piece, and not just really the final piece, but the piece that enables them to actually keep their own role players. I mean, you can't even keep Beverly, you can't keep Josh Smith until you get that last guy, because until you get that last guy, you're still in this
Yeah, you don't
pattern
want to go over
of
cap.
needing that flexibility. And So I keep having so many people tweeting at me about Dragic's numbers being down, or Dragic this, Dragic that, about pointing out different flaws in his game. And yes, he's not perfect, but you can't just wait around for the perfect player. And if you consider that Chris Bosh maybe was the perfect fit, you're not gonna get another opportunity like that, especially considering that Dwight Howard is on a diminished timeline right now. Like, we don't
Yeah.
know how long he has left.
Yeah, and we don't know how effective his time he has left will be. So yeah, they do have to move now. I mean, if you can get someone like Dragic and Dragic, you can keep him long term, then he's a great solution. I think it's pretty clear that like in a perfect world right now, if they could go out and grab any point guard, it would have to be Mike Conley, right? He'd be absolutely perfect in Houston. But that's not happening. There's no way. There's no better option. You go with the options you have, like you said. If you can get Goran Dragic for anything less than like a king's ransom, you do so. He's going to get paid over the summer, but that's fine. You might be able to convince him to take a big 1 year deal so that you can renegotiate it when the cap jumps up the following summer. So
What's the most you would be willing to give up in a trade for Dragic?
I mean, the Pelicans pick is going to be the core of whatever trade happens.
You wouldn't give
Obviously,
up Modi Yunus, correct?
no, I'd give him Jones. I mean, Jones like the draft pick and Jones, and then like some salary filler, Shved or something to make enough the salary close enough. Yeah, I think that'd be about right. I don't see why you'd have to give up Modiunus. He's really integral, and there's other useful pieces on the team.
I mean, I almost felt like the way that report read was that it was basically talking about Modi Yunus, and like, to me, there's no way they give up Modi Yunus for Dragic, if you consider that. I mean, he's your starting power forward, and you're a contender. You can't. I mean, you're basically robbing, you know,
Yeah,
one aspect of your team. Um, and it's funny though, if this was last year, then Jones would be that player we were talking about. So we don't know what his potential is still like in the eyes of other GMs. Do you think that they get this deal done, or is it?
that's just gonna depend on what the Phoenix ownership is feeling like. You can, it's. I mean, we've seen this enough times. No, it's almost a fool's errand to try to handicap any of this stuff. I just said it always surprises you. I wouldn't be surprised to see leaks about Houston talking to Denver. If for nothing other reason than to show that they have other options and to try to as a negotiating tactic for Dragic. So that
It's a buyer's market. I mean, you have Lawson on the market. There's also Reggie Jackson, and of course Dragic and Isaiah Thomas. So really four guys out there, and they all fit into kind of different levels. Where I think that Pelicans pick is too much to give up for Jackson or Thomas. It's probably around the right price for Dragic. But with Lawson, I don't know if you have enough to get him, and so it'll be interesting. But it's really interesting the situation the Rockets are in. There's four viable options, and they may be really the only buyer on the market, and so you have to think, just weighing those odds, that they're able to come away with
yeah,
something.
yeah, I think they'll find a good deal for somebody. It may not be Dragic. Who knows how Dragic feels about it? I mean, in this case, because it is a rental, how he feels about it probably doesn't matter. Like if he would like to go to Houston, that'll raise the price and be better for everybody really. If he's not particularly interested in going to Houston, it's going to be a wrench in the works. So we'll have to see what the reports are coming out. Obviously, something's going to happen in the next few days. It has to. It'll happen or it won't.
If you if they get Dragic and they re-sign him, and I think that if they trade for him, it's with the understanding that they're absolutely going to go all out to keep him. There's no way that they give up real assets to obtain him without keeping him around. That locks you into this team. So your core is going to be Dragic, Harden, Howard, Ariza. Brewer is not going to exercise his player option, and you hope to keep Beverly and Smith. Of course, the finances there will be tricky, but you've basically locked yourself into that team. Do you think that team is good enough to win the title?
That probably.
I
Uh,
agree. I agree, and that alone is all you need to know
yeah.
about whether or not they should go for it.
I mean, I think the team as it is has a legit shot. But they're in that tier where if something breaks their way in the playoffs, then they could get a title.
Yeah.
They're not in like They're not in that sort of a Hawks Warriors. Oh, they're destroying everybody every night tier, but it's only those two teams. They're in that second tier with basically everybody else. So if they can make any improvement, it's huge.
They're kind of
And
like the Rockets in '93, where they have maybe the best player in the league, but they don't really know where they are, kind of feeling themselves, kind of feeling them, kind of feeling things out.
yeah,
Um, but I think that core is absolutely good enough to win the title. And